Welcome to Frenzied Printing. My name is Becky. I'll be your host. Let's get into today's video.
Okay, let's talk about supports. Supports in printing are required when you have regions that are floating without touching the build plate. This model, I chose this for this video because if you could see, the only pieces that touch the build plate are the tips of these claws and the base of the hilt right here. This is the handle from a white Power Ranger Saba sword. So you can see I'm going to need some supports in here. I'm going to need some supports here. I need some supports up in here for the tip of the helmet, supports for the chin, supports for these teeth. And I think that's about it. I have the bottom of the blade on a different build plate. So let's talk about supports and settings and what type of supports there are and what changes when you use different things. And what is this pink box? All right. This pink box is actually a support blocker cube. The reason I use this is because there's a lot of nooks and crannies on this object that don't need support. Like, I don't need support on every single little crease inside the handle here. I don't need support on this tiny little overhang here. There's a lot of places in here that don't need support, but the software wants to put support on them. And I find it easiest to just add a support blocker cube that will support, well, it'll block all supports. But I do want supports on certain areas, like in here, in the chin, in the helmet, and the teeth, like I said. So how do I get the best of both worlds? This is how I do it, and it's not, there isn't going to be a method that's correct or incorrect. Everybody does things differently. The system is designed to give you multiple choices on how to get things done. So it's based on preference, do what you like to do. So I like to go into my support settings. Let me see, make sure they're on. Yeah, enable supports. Um, I'm going to use tree supports, 30-degree threshold angle. These are my settings on the build plate only. If you don't have this box checked, what happens is you could get a support coming off a spot, and instead of going over to the build plate, it attaches to your model. That's not always desirable because you'll get a scar on the model down here where the support touches. And if you don't feel like sanding, you might want to check this box. I have default for support filament. We'll talk about this in a second. The top Z distance, this is your interface distance. I have mine at 0.25. I've had it all the way up to 0.28 and still had really great results. The reason that this is increased from the default values is because if you've ever tried to remove supports from something, especially something very fragile, like these tiny little tips of this helmet, you could break this little spot on the helmet, and that's not good. I don't know if anybody has ever had nightmare supports or even these teeth. You could literally break the teeth off if you don't have a healthy Z distance between your support interface and your model. So that's what this is. I like to have 4 interface layers. The interface layer count, the reason I use 4 is for stuff like this. It's like pointed. Um, Having like 1 or 2 layers of interface, not really helpful. So things that are very contoured, I like to have 4. So these are my go-to settings. If you don't know what each setting does, you can just hover over it and these little boxes pop up and they tell you what to expect when you're manipulating that item. So these are my go-tos. I'll show you the difference between my support settings and the default support settings. So, right, the support blocker. Let's talk about that real quick. If you click on your model and then click this little icon up here, this tool, it's Support Painter. Support Painter, you can tell it to paint on overhangs only. You can either use a circle tool, a sphere tool to like actually paint where you want your supports to touch, or you can use this fill tool and tell it what the fill angle is, um, and anywhere that you can see on this model here that's highlighted is an overhang. So if I want supports here, I just click it and it tells the software to put supports on this spot. So what I like to do is I like to come in here and paint the areas that I want supported, which are in brown. I've already done it. So these brown areas I've painted, requesting support enforcers in these locations. The green areas are overhangs, but I feel like they don't need supports. They're not as severe of an angle for me to want to support them. And the red areas are, based on the parameters I put in here, are technically overhangs that should be supported or they're recommended to be supported. You can make your own decisions. You don't have to have supports on these spots if you feel like they're not needed. But you also don't have to go through and click on each one to block the supports. And I'll tell you the difference. If you're not quite sure, there's a little question mark right here that tells you how the painting tool works. So my left mouse button is going to enforce supports. My right mouse button is going to block supports. If I want to come through and enforce supports, I'm going to click it. It turns brown. If I want to block it, I'm going to right click it. Turns red. If I don't want to go through this entire model and right click all of these spots, it turns a brighter red, right? That's very time consuming. So what I do instead of going through and right clicking all the spots that I don't want supports, which seems to be all these little grooves all the way around the model, then what I do is I enforce the supports that I do want, exit the tool, and then you can right click on your model and then choose add support blocker, and I use a cube. And then it inserts this little pink cube and then I make it the size that I need to cover my entire model. So I've turned on supports, I've painted support enforcers only where I want them, and then I add this blocker cube to block all other supports that I did not paint. And then I'll slice it and show you what that looks like. Here is the sliced view of my Saba. You could see I have some nice slender trees reaching up to the supports where I've painted them. And we have all the supports on our bottom that we absolutely need. Over here in the side panel, if you're in the line type view, you can see the total filament weight, 263.6 grams. It will give you an estimated cost. That's if you entered a cost of your spool. And then it also gives you an estimated print time. This is just an estimate. Sometimes it takes longer than this. And don't forget that in the workbench, you can actually change the speed of your print. So for instance, This printer here I have on sport mode. That's because this is actually the Saba. I have it on sport mode because I used really slow print speeds in the slicer, and that's because I want to slow it down at certain spots. So I wanted it to go slow here where it was printing the fangs, and I want it to go slow up here where these bigger overhangs are. But when it's above here and all the way to here, it can go on sport mode, which is high speed, and that, because of the settings and values that I put on the speed to begin with, will be regular speed. So I did a slow speed for just this little part down here. Now I'm on high speed and it's going to get here, and then I'm going to switch it back to slow speed or standard. Anyway, enough about speeds. We're here to talk about supports. The other screen I wanted to show you, or the other view, is right here where it says line type, change it to filament. And in this view, now you can see the color of the filament, right? I have one color. I'm going to hand paint the details on this item, but if this was a multicolor object, we would be able to see all of the different colors that are going to be on it. This is where you can kind of double check and see if your colors are placed properly and that you didn't mess up with the painting tool at all, so you can go back and fix it. The other thing I like about this view is it tells you how much filament will be used on your model versus how much will be used on your supports. So my model is 163 grams, my supports are 60 grams. That's what I like about this view. Are these weights, and I like to keep track of how much support weight I am throwing in the garbage and try to just be cognizant of that and try my best to reduce it but not have a failed print. Okay, so let me just show you. Let's just start down here. And this is the base of my supports. You want your base to have good squish. You need to have this be very close together. So when we're talking about this base squish, or the spacing, when I say squish, I mean the spacing between each line, that can be manipulated over here. So I have it listed at 90% density. That's first layer density. That's what this is. So yes, this is great. 90% density is great. One time I was using a stock setting, one of these stock ones, and it ended up inputting 45%, and it looked very flimsy, and I had no confidence that that support was going to stay adhered to my build plate. Figured it was going to knock over at some point. Due to the high speed of these printers, that does tend to happen if you don't have a really good base percent. If you switch, oh wait, I wanted to talk about one more thing. If we scroll this up on the right hand side, you can see layer by layer what's going on with your print, how every line is going down. Let me just collapse this real quick. All right, so right here, if you look, you can see the very first interface layer. This is for one of the fangs. So this is the very first, I think it's for a fang. Let me look. No, it's not. The fangs are over here. My bad. This is just for another part of the model. I thought I was zoomed in over here. Okay, hold on. This is an interface. Interface is that little piece, the little layer between your support and your model. This is what's going to touch your model. So here's one layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, 4. I put in 4 interface layers over here. If you remember, that's my favorite number. And then we go up one more and it starts printing the model. These are more interfaces because it's a curved fang. So the interfaces have to touch the model at different parts of that overhang. And then the distance between this model wall, which is orange, and this overhang is that 0.25. And I feel like with this machine, this is my Anycubic Cobra 3 Max. With that machine, my interface distance 0.25 seems to be very good for removing supports and still being supported, so we don't lose this nice smooth surface, but we can still remove this support so that it doesn't scar the surface, or I don't have to use tools to remove it and cut up my hands or accidentally snip something off of the model. Or when you pull supports off, sometimes accidentally break things off your model, especially when we're talking about something so small as a fang or a tooth. So here it's putting down another bit of interface before it starts, and this blue is overhang. If you're not exactly sure what these colors mean, you can expand this color scheme thing. This tells you what all those colors are. Like, what does it mean to you? So then you can see in here these beautiful interfaces are being built as kind of a little web to catch this bridge, this very big bridge. It's the underside, that flat part underneath the hilt. So that's how I like to do my supports. I will show you what grid supports, which is auto, these normal auto grid supports look like. And then I'll also show you the tree supports settings under default settings and what the difference is. So this is what my support settings look like for my trees. And then if I switch this over to a default like this is just asking me if I want to save these parameters when switching over to default. I'm just going to hit discard. And I'll show you what that looks like. So earlier I said I would show you what this looks like if the only thing I changed was the support type. So I switched it from tree to normal. This is what normal supports look like. They're very grid like pattern. If I slice this down a little bit, you can see it. And looking down from the top. Yeah, you see that? Well, okay, I changed the default to be honeycomb pattern. I feel like that gives it a little bit more stability, and my supports tend to fall over less frequently with the honeycomb pattern versus the grid pattern that is the default. So my bad. This is what it looks like. And so you can tell right away that this is going to use a lot more material to print this way for supports instead of using those very slender trees that I built before. You can see over here, we went from a 16-hour print to a 22-hour print. That is a lot more print time. It's a lot more electricity that you're going to use to run your printer for a longer period of time. If I switch this view from line type to filament, we can also see that we're spending a little bit more than 100 grams more plastic just to print these supports. You can see that the amount of plastic we're using on the model is 163 grams, and the amount of plastic we're using on the supports is 165 grams. We're actually using more plastic on the support material than we are on the actual model. It's so frustrating and so wasteful. This is why I don't use the normal auto supports, the grid supports. It's a waste. Even though I've painted certain areas and I've blocked certain areas, you can't tell it to like thin this out. Like it has to be there. So this is why I don't use this type of support unless I have a model that's very tall and thin that tends to fail or knock over, or that the tree supports are too slender and they tend to fail and knock over, then I might switch, bite the bullet, pay the extra cash, and switch over to grid support. For now, I'm going to try printing this because it's um, relatively, quick print. I mean, 16 hours to a lot of people doesn't feel fast, but when you've been printing large items for a long time, like I have, 16 hours is a drop in the bucket. So if I try to print it and it fails, I'm only out like 163 grams of plastic, or maybe 200 grams of plastic, because it does start to print supports at the base. And then I try it again and I print it with a better support system. So I don't go this route unless I absolutely have to. So we can take a quick look. I just loaded up a primitive model in here with some standard settings. We can take a quick look at how to make these tree supports different if you're aiming to make them different. So let's take a look at some of these options and see what they do and what the difference is in our slice view. So I turned on supports. This is a standard profile and looks like it's on tree. So let's start there. And this is the standard 40-degree angle. So support will be generated for overhangs whose slope angle is below this threshold. If you're not sure what that means, it means the angle between your straight upright part and your part that's going to the side. So whatever that angle is, this is obviously a 90-degree angle, and that would generate a support. Okay, so I came back in and I angled this overhang part 45-degree angle and then resliced it, and you can see now there's no supports generated. That's because it doesn't meet the threshold. Remember earlier when I was talking about the support painter, how it will highlight supports or overhangs, I should say, based on whatever degree that you put in here. It defaults to 40, just like the slicer defaults to 40. You can change that just by sliding this. See how it's no longer highlighted once I get to 0? So that's how you can adjust that. Then let's explore some more of these settings. First layer expansion. All right, first layer expansion expands the first raft of support layer to improve bed adhesion. So if we were to increase this from 2 to let's just do something outrageous like 20 and then reslice it, I'll show you what that means. It does say first layer, so just look at this first layer here. So if you felt like, my supports are constantly detaching or knocking over or whatever, what can I do to make the base of them much larger? There you go. It's like adding a brim to your support instead of adding a brim to your model. So that's what that is. Then we can come back in here and look at a different setting. Let's see. Enforce supports for the first blank layers. This one doesn't really, when you hover over, it doesn't tell you, but that's just saying I want to make sure that supports are on starting at layer blah, blah, blah. So if you didn't want anything supported on your bottom, whatever layers down here, then you could just enter that number in here. Raft. So rafts are really neat things. It puts like a little base underneath your model like that. So you can see now my model has a little raft to rest on. This is really handy if you have something that has a very narrow base or it's very tiny. I know people are used to using brims, but sometimes a raft is needed, especially if the underside of the part that's touching your build plate is very tricky. Like if it's got a lot of texture to it or a lot of high and low spots where now let's say you have multiple little spots touching the build plate, but they're very small. You'd want to build it on a raft. So earlier I was showing this filament for support spot and I skipped over it and said I'll come back to that later. So welcome to later. Let's talk about this. If I was having a problem with this extreme overhang right here, or they might call it a bridge, this spot, if it comes with sagging loose lines and your plastic is not really stuck to each other nice and tight like it looks in the picture, and it annoys you and you said, you know what, I want this to be better. How can I improve this? I can't tell you how many times I've seen this post online. If you have the Anycubic Cobra with a Ace Pro machine, the Ace Pro allows you to load multiple types of filament in each slot. So up here you can see I have slot A, or slot 1, I'm sorry, slot 1, PLA, and slot 2, PETG. And then I can change my support interface to be PETG. Remember, the interface is the part that touches your model. So if I tell it, make the interface PETG, but the rest of the support PLA, I can then go down here and change my top Z distance to 0. You can do that too. And let's see, what else do I want to change for this? That's it, I think. And then slice it. Oh wait, how many interface layers do I have? And this is okay, 3, so it's fine. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about. PETG does not stick to PLA. So if you make your interface layer, which is this yellow part right here, PETG, and you tell it to have 0 space between the bottom of your model and the interface, this is going to give you the smoothest bottom layer because this is what it's printing on. It's printing right up against something. It's just like printing that first layer down here on the build plate. You know how it gets nice and smooth? It is exactly like that. So you're replicating that effect right here on this little bed, this interface bed. This little yellow layer here, there's 3 of them, are PETG. So print that in PETG, then on top of that, print PLA, and you're golden. The bottom of this overhang is going to look amazing. The interface spacing, you're telling your slicer how far apart you want each line to be. So the default is 0.2, we've already seen that. Let's increase it to something like 0.9, just so you can see, you know, exactly what it is that changed. And you can tweak this if you want to make them closer together or further apart because you either feel like it's not enough support or it's overkill support. And yeah, so you can change how far apart the lines are on your interface just like that. The setting for support object XY distance, if you hover over here, it tells you that controls the XY separation between an object and its support. Why would you want to change this? I'll show you the before. Look at how much room is between the model and the support. And I maxed it out at 10 millimeters, and I have so much more room now between the support and the model. And why is that important? So sometimes when you're printing, your support touches your model or it gets a little too close to the model and it leaves a little scar on your model, even though it's not supporting that area, but it touched it, so now it ruined it. You can try to fix it with a quick blast of heat, but it doesn't fix it and totally take it away. This little Darth Vader keychain had supports coming off underneath its helmet. and then down to the build plate, but they were so close to his shoulders that they scarred his shoulders right up. In that case, you'd want to increase your object XY distance so that they have to go around the object. They have to basically do reaching to get to their target area. Okay, this setting for tip diameter controls the diameter of the tip of your organic trees. So this was the default 0.2, and this is I maxed it out at 2 millimeters. So this is 0.2 millimeter tip, and this is a 2 millimeter tip. So the next thing I want to talk about is branch density. I took a screen snip of the default, which is 30% density. Again, if you hover, it tells you the definition of this field. This was at 30% density. You can see up here, it looks fairly dense. And this is 10% density. So we've just basically reduced the number of branches allowed in our tree. That's what that one does. Then we have tree support branch diameter. I could increase the diameter and show you what that does, but increases the diameter of the branch. See how fat they are now? So if you really have a support issue, might increase the diameter of your support branches or just switch over to grid. Branch diameter angle. This is the angle of the branch from the tree. So it's default at 5. We can increase or decrease. It says here an angle of 0 will cause the branches to have uniform thickness over their length. A bit of an angle can increase stability of the organic support. So real quick, I switched this over to a preset setting that Anycubic put in their slicer. This is one of the ones that comes with the slicer, and these presets are great for a lot of things. If people aren't super familiar with how these settings work or what they mean, and they don't, take the time to learn what each thing is and what it does to your model, it's great for people that just want a quick print. I just want to, open the box, print something out, use a preset, not worry about what that means. But then you see the posts of, how can I fix this? What did I do wrong? And then, it happens and they learn. That's what those forums are for, learning. So just for funsies, I went ahead and switched from my custom preset that I built to the Anycubic preset that they built. This is the standard default grid settings for supports. Look how close together these grid accordion lines are. Great for stability, but print time is 26 hours, and check out how much filament it uses. 331 grams of filament versus the model weight of 178 grams. It's like double. So you're throwing away twice as much plastic as you actually need for your model. Just insane to me. I went ahead and put in the Anycubic standard preset here and used their tree support settings. This is their standard tree support settings. So you can see how they're a little bit different from my custom ones. Okay, so what I did was I went to the preset that's in the slicer and I switched it to tree, and here's what the default settings are for tree supports. They look thicker than mine, just slightly, and they have a lot more bends, where mine are a little more vertical. We can see the print time is actually reduced to 14 hours, 7 minutes. That's probably due to some quality settings that they have listed in here. Walls definitely print slower. So my settings have 3 walls. This setting has 2 walls. So it's probably the reduced speed is due to settings, not really to anything to do with the supports. And if you look here under filament, you can see the amount of supports is just a little bit more than my settings. So it's a little bit more plastic to use these default settings. Not sure if they are more stable than mine. They say the support trees, if they're straighter uh, and have less bends, that they're more stable. I haven't really had any problems with the way that I have my set up, and I have mine set up for a reason, because sometimes when you have a plate full of items, or you have a very large item that takes up almost the whole build plate, and you turn on your settings and they're so thick at the bottom that they go off the build plate or they run into the model next to it, that's a problem. So that's why my custom settings for my tree supports are the way that they are. And I believe that's pretty much all I know about supports.
Luna the shop mascot says, if you're enjoying this content and you want to see more, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much.